Thank you for listening to Discovering the Scriptures with Dr. Peter John Parisis. Currently, we're in Daniel chapter 5, verse 6. Let's start this out with prayer. Father, just come to you in prayer and ask that you would please give us wisdom and knowledge and instructions. Help us to hear your Holy Spirit and his teachings. Help us to be obedient, to put away all prayer hindrances as fast as we can know about them, to learn to walk and talk with you more, to have a close relationship like Elijah and Moses and Mary. I do pray and ask that you would just help us to meditate upon your word and talk with us now as we give a moment of silence out of respect and an opportunity for you to talk with us. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Okay. Need more time? Hit your pause button now. Daniel chapter 5 verse 6. Reading from the King James Bible. Quote, "Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another." Unquote. Reading now from the Young's Literal Translation. Quote, "Then the king's countenance hath changed, and his thoughts do trouble him, and the joints of his loins are loosed, and his knees are smiting one against another." End of the Young's Literal Translation. Let's parse this, and then we'll look at it first in the paragraph it's written. Then the king's countenance was changed. Parse that out. PL stem, casually written, perfect aspect, so it's completed. And his thoughts troubled him. Okay, now the stem just changed to poil, which is a passive casual, and it's an imperfect aspect which expresses an action, process, or condition which is not yet complete. Continuing troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed. Now that's an Israel stem, and that is it's an intensive causative. It's a rarely formed verb, and let's see, it's also a to be aspect. Let's also look at the definition of this. Were loosed is loose, dissolved, dwell, began. That's the definition of that word. So they were loosed. And continuing, and his knees smote. So that's a PL stem, casually written. Participle is an aspect, so to be. And definition for the smote is to knocking of. So smote means either smoke, knocking of the knees, continuing on, one against another. So that ends the parsing of this. Now let's go ahead and look at let's look at this in context. Daniel chapter 5 verses 5 through 10. Quote, "In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. The king cried out to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the smoothsayers. And the king spake and said to the wise men of Babylon, Whosoever shall read this writing and show me the interpretation thereof shall be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be the third ruler of the kingdom. Then came in all the king's wise men, but they could not read the writing, nor make known to the king the interpretation thereof. Then was King Belteshazzar greatly troubled, and his countenance was changed in him, and his lords were astonished. unquote, King James Version. John Gill's commentary on Daniel 5:6. Quote, then the king's countenance changed, or his brightness, his ruddy countenance, his florid looks, his gay airs, all his jollity and mirth that appeared in his face, were changed into paleness, sadness, and confusion. And his thoughts troubled him. What should be the meaning of this? Perhaps he might immediately fear it, presage ruin and destruction to him. The sins of his former life might at once come into his thoughts, and those particularly he had now been guilty of: his luxury, intemperancy, his idolatry, and profaneness of the vessels of the sanctuary, which his conscience might accuse him of, and give him great distress and trouble, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, or the girdles of his loins, which were loosed or broke, through the agitation he was in, or he was all over in a sweat, so that he was obliged to loose his girdle, or, as persons in great fear and consternation, he was seized with a pain in his back. It opened, as it were, nor could he hold his urine, as Gottes and others. See Isaiah 45, verse 1. Reading from the King James Bible, quote, thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden, to subdue nations before him. I will loose the loins of the kings, to open for him the two-leaved gates, and the gates shall not be shut, unquote. Where this seems to be prophesied of, and his knees smote one against another, as in the case of persons in a great tremor or under a panic. End of John Gill's commentary on Daniel chapter 5, verse 6. So we see the king's behavior towards being found that there is someone greater than he. For he put on this huge banquet for 1,000 people. But now there's someone even greater than him. Someone greater than the people trying to break down his walls and conquer his nation. And he sees part of his hand writing on the wall. He's very troubled. What does all this mean? What can we draw from it? Continue on with this. We'll start to see. You're going to form your own opinion and thoughts on this. I'm going to give you what we have here and what's presented, so you can go ahead and form your own thoughts, your own doctrine. Okay? Please keep me in your prayers and this ministry. Currently on this medium of YouTube, it would be very helpful if you would click on the ads that are associated, that are brought up with this verse and other things from Sermon Library. If you click on the ads, the advertisers have to pay YouTube a portion, and then I get a small part of it. Currently, we're running about just over $300 worth of support a month by all the subscribers. Clicking on ads here and there, either on purpose or by accident. The more you click, the more you help support this ministry. If you want to directly support this ministry, you can buy the shirts and the t-shirts and things like that to show your support. I do get a couple dollars from each one that's sold. And also, if you want to give directly, we're not nonprofit yet, but you can send money directly to PayPal through my email, peterjohnparisis@gmail.com, and help support the ministry, or you can just mail the checks directly to me. It is not a nonprofit, so it's not a tax write-off, but it would be helpful. I have not received any money from anybody at all from this ministry yet. I have had 5 people buy items, and that is very appreciative. Clicking on the ad, I've had quite a few. So please support this ministry. You do tithe and you do give gifts, and that would be very helpful if you would think about tithing to this ministry. And then when it becomes nonprofit, you can write it off. Until then, you get blessings from God. And I think that's more important than a tax write-off, in my opinion. Do need your help, because the more that you help, the more hours that I can put towards recording, and the less overtime that I need to work in order to pay my bills. I am a working minister. I do work. Boy, do I ever. Thank you. May God bless you.